Welcome, Islanders. Today we are going to do an experiment called salty or fresh. What floats in salty versus fresh water? The materials that you will need are a permanent marker, a spoon, salt, a cup of water, an empty cup, some warm water that I have just put in the microwave for a few minutes. Then you will need your items that you're going to actually try to float or sink in your water. We have an apple, a piece of an apple actually, a hard-boiled egg, a plastic hair clip, some Cheerios, a rock, a paper clip, and a rubber band. Now, in order to get prepped, we actually need to take our permanent marker and write fresh on the cup with water in it already. Okay, I've written fresh on there, and that is going to represent our fresh water. Then we need to write salt on our cup that we are going to put salt water in, okay? Now, you're gonna take your warm water and you're going to pour it in your salt cup. Now, the only reason we have this a little warm, it's not hot, it is just a little bit warm, is so that we can dissolve our 2 tablespoons of salt in the water easily. So then you're gonna take your 2 tablespoons of salt. Now, I have pre-measured this, so it is 2 tablespoons. So if you don't have a bag that's pre-measured, you wanna make sure that you actually measure 2 tablespoons of salt. And we are going to dump that in our salt water cup. Then you're going to take your spoon and you're just going to help dissolve that water a little bit. Now, how many of you have gone swimming in a lake or a pond? And how many of you have been swimming in an ocean? What is the difference between fresh water, which is what comes from the lakes and ponds, and the ocean water? It's salt. Ocean water is full of salt and fresh water is not. We need both salt water and fresh water to survive. Do you know which one we drink? Fresh water. What else do we do with it? We can bathe in it. We water our plants with fresh water. But even though we don't drink salty ocean water, we still need it, because it affects our weather and it provides a home for billions of sea creatures. God thought of everything when He made water for us. I'm so thankful God knows everything and has the power and the goodness to make water. We're going to check out both freshwater and saltwater today and see what sinks or floats in each of them. You'll see here there's a container of saltwater and freshwater. We're going to test some of these items to see which float and which sink in the water. Before we do though, I have a question for you. How do you think the salt affects water? Take a minute to discuss it amongst yourselves. When salt is dissolved in water, like it is in the ocean, it makes the water more dense. More dense means a cup of salt water is heavier than a cup of fresh water. Observe carefully as we take turns picking up the cup of fresh water and then a cup of salt water. I want each of you to try it. See which one you think feels a little bit heavier. Although they have the same amount of water in them, the salt water, which is the cup that's cloudy, will be heavier than the fresh water, the cup that's clear. That's because salt water is denser. For something to float on water, it has to be lighter or less dense than the water underneath it. Since salt water is denser than fresh water, some items are light enough to float in salt water, but still too dense to float in fresh water. You may have noticed this when you were at the beach. It's easier for a person to float in a salty ocean than for a pool or a lake. Now you'll notice in front of you all these items. You guys are going to take turns putting each of these items in the fresh water and the salt water. I want you to observe what happens. If an item floats, that means it is lighter or less dense than the water underneath it. I want you to document which items do what in each freshwater and saltwater. I am not going to do this for you because I don't want to spoil any of the surprises, but I do want you to take turns putting all the items in and see how cool this is. Before you started putting the items in the water, I bet you had guesses as to if it would float or sink, right? You had questions. Sometimes though, we ask questions about life and why things happen, and those questions aren't so easy to answer. However, the Bible makes it clear that God is bigger than all of our unanswered questions. And though we may not get our questions answered on this side of heaven, they do get answered. So next time you go swimming in a lake, pond, or ocean, remember that God is powerful enough to create the water. And He's also powerful, loving, and kind to create you. You can trust Him.